The halls of Winterfell were cold that night, not from the usual bite of the northern winds, but from something more insidious, a silence so thick it hung between the stone walls like fog. Lord Eddard Stark sat at the head of the long table, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. His face wore the weight of a decision that could shatter everything he believed in. Across from him sat Maester Luwin, aged and quiet, his scrolls laid out, yet untouched. The Raven had come hours ago. Not from the south, no. This one came by secret channel, delivered by a hooded man who was already gone before the sun had fully set. It bore the wax seal of the Iron Throne, though broken before it reached Ned's hand. No name, no threats, just an offer and a demand. King Robert had grown unpredictable. The small council was splintered with greed, Littlefinger's tongue was silvered with lies, and the Queen, well, even the North knew she was not to be trusted. But this raven was not from Robert. It was from Tywin Lannister himself. Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, father of 5, and keeper of the old ways, now faced the unthinkable, an agreement inked in secrecy, where the North would swear fealty, not publicly, not with banners or blood, but in quiet surrender. A deal, forged not in loyalty, but necessity. "Your Grace," Luwin finally spoke, soft and uncertain, "this is dangerous." "I'm no king," Ned murmured, staring down at the table. "You will be if you do this," the Maester said carefully, "but not the kind the North will honor." Ned stood, slowly. "It's not about honor anymore, Luwin. It's about survival." That phrase would haunt him. The offer from the Lannisters was simple: allow the South to believe the North would stand independent, but in secret provide information. Allow Southern scouts to pass through the neck unnoticed. Suppress any murmurs of rebellion in the mountain clans. And in return, the Starks would be spared, protected. Catelyn would be left untouched. Jon Snow, even the bastard, would be permitted a post of influence. Sansa would be matched to Joffrey, and Arya would be allowed to return unpunished no matter her behavior. Robb would inherit Winterfell without war. It was peace, but it came coated in treason. That night, Ned stood before the heart tree, its face carved in sorrow, and whispered the names of every Stark before him. Brandon, Rickard, Lyanna. He knew what they would say. The gods would damn him for it. But the next morning, the reply was sent. No ravens. A man on horseback. It would never be written, never be confessed. The North bent the knee in the shadows, and no one would know. No one except the dire wolves. Ghost growled for days afterward, and Nymeria refused to come. Near the gates, even Grey Wind, the proudest, paced restlessly. The Starks said the wolves always knew. They were right. In the weeks that followed, nothing changed, on the surface. Robb trained harder. Catelyn smiled thinner. Bran asked more questions about loyalty. Arya stopped praying at all. Only Ned's eyes betrayed the truth. Something inside him had broken. Then came the South's first request. A man named Torrhen Slate was to be given over. He was a distant cousin of the Karstarks, known for harboring fugitives from King's Landing. He'd fled north when he learned he was marked for execution by Queen Cersei. A quiet man, with no love for war or politics, only kin. And yet the Raven came. Send him south, or the peace ends here. Ned didn't sleep that night. But the next morning, Torrhen Slate was gone, and the blacksmith who'd given him shelter was found hung from a tree the next day, an act no one confessed to, but everyone understood. The North was bleeding, not from war, but from silence. The news of Torrhen Slate's death travelled slower than gossip, but heavier than gold. In the North, whispers held weight. They wrapped themselves in the wind and carried from hearth to hearth. No bannerman dared speak openly, but around fires, mugs of ale trembled in hands, and eyes flicked toward Winterfell with caution, even resentment. They didn't know the truth, of course, not all of it, But they knew something had changed. Catelyn Stark sensed it too. She wasn't told of the secret fealty, but she wasn't a fool. She'd seen the letter Ned burned in the fire with trembling hands. She watched the way he avoided Rob's gaze, how he flinched when Arya spoke of rebellion, and how his voice cracked when talking of honor. The man she married was fading, and something colder had taken his place. One morning, while the snow fell soft as ash, Catelyn found Maester Luwin alone in the rookery, his hands wrapped around a scroll he didn't send. "You know something, don't you?" she asked. Luwin didn't look at her. "I know many things. Most of them are burdens, not blessings." Her voice sharpened. "Is my husband in danger?" The Maester met her eyes, and for the first time in years, she saw fear in his. "He already chose the danger, my lady. Now we all live with it." Before she could press him, a cry echoed through the walls. Robb had returned from a patrol beyond the last river with news that chilled even the strongest in Winterfell. A band of southern riders had been spotted, too far north for comfort, bearing no sigil, but too organized to be mere travelers. They avoided towns, avoided people. Their tracks suggested speed, but not secrecy. Like wolves hunting in plain sight. "They weren't supposed to come this far," Ned muttered, more to himself than to Robb. Robb heard it, though. Supposed to. Ned recovered quickly, waving it off as a misunderstanding. "I mean, travelers don't usually push, this deep in winter." But Robb's suspicion was planted. His father had always been honest, painfully honest. This was not that. That evening, Jon Snow approached him at the Godswood. The bastard had a way of showing up when silence was loudest. "You've changed," Jon said. Ned didn't respond. "Is it the war you think is incoming, or the one that already arrived?" Ned looked at his son, not by blood, but by bond. "The war I feared came with silence, not swords." Jon didn't understand, but he would in time. Later that night, another demand arrived, delivered not by raven, but by man. A Lannister agent, cloaked and smug, had the gall to walk into Winterfell's gates with no fear. He handed Ned a sealed letter, bearing no name but unmistakable command. "Expose the Umber's northern outpost. The Crown wants proof of loyalty." Ned froze. The Umbers were proud men, harsh, loyal, unforgiving. If word of this demand leaked, the entire North would rise in fury. But the Lannister agent merely smiled and said, "Think of your family, especially the pretty daughters in the capital." Ned knew then. It was never about peace. It was about control. The South didn't want obedience. It wanted the North to be broken into pieces so small it could never rise again. That night, the stars over Winterfell were dim. Ned Stark stood at the battlements watching the snow fall. He thought of Lyanna, of Brandon, of every ancestor buried beneath the crypts, and he hated himself. He sent a letter to the Umbers, but not the one the South wanted. He warned them. It was his first act of rebellion, and it would not go unnoticed. The next morning, the Lannister agent was found dead near the stables, his throat slit clean. No one asked questions, but the silence in Winterfell grew heavier, darker. The wolves howled louder that night, not in mourning, in warning. The storm finally came, not with thunder or fire, but with footsteps in snow, hundreds of them. Riders and ravens alike carried word that men were moving in the south, not Lannister troops, not openly at least. But someone rich in gold and quiet in intentions, had started bribing minor lords, especially those near the neck. The crown was seeping into the north like poison through a cracked wall. Ned knew it was a test. They'd sensed the defiance in his last move, the death of their courier, the letter to the Umbers. They wanted to know if he'd broken free of their leash. And if he had, they'd burn everything he loved. In the grate. All the family gathered. Robb, tall and growing too fast, stood beside his mother, who said nothing but watched everything. Jon leaned in shadows, eyes locked on his father, whose voice had gone hoarse with silence. Sansa sat stiff, Still clinging to southern fantasies, Arya sat cross-legged on the stone floor like a wolf pup ready to bite. "I need to speak plainly," Ned began. "The winds are turning. The south will not stay where it belongs. And when it comes, it will ask us to kneel." Robb stepped forward. "We'll never kneel." But Ned didn't return the fire. "What if we already did?" The room stilled. Jon straightened. "What does that mean?" Arya was already glaring. "You didn't. You wouldn't." Sansa paled, her lip trembling. "I made a choice," Ned said slowly, "to protect you all. When the South reached out, I thought, perhaps we could survive this without war." Catelyn's hand shot to her mouth. She staggered back like she'd been struck. "You bent the knee to the Lannisters?" "No banners were lowered. No lords were summoned. It was done in secret, and meant to keep blood off the snow." "But you lied to every house in the north," Robb said, his voice low. "You lied to us. I chose family over fire. I chose peace." "You chose fear," Catelyn snapped, eyes glassy. No one spoke after that. The next day, a rider from House Glover arrived, face battered, voice urgent. His message was simple. White Harbor has been compromised. The southern influence had finally taken root. Gold had flowed into the city like wine, and Wyman Manderley, the Lord of White Harbor, had been offered trade, power, and security, for loyalty, for silence. The North was fracturing, and Ned's secret oath had made him complicit in its undoing. He called a council. Bannermen were summoned, but only a few arrived. Some sent ravens with excuses, others sent nothing at all. The North was withdrawing from Winterfell, not out of rebellion, but suspicion. No one trusted the wolves anymore. "Lord Stark," said Rose Bolton when he arrived last, his eyes colder than the wind, "some say the South already owns us. I ask plainly, is there truth to this?" Ned didn't answer. He couldn't. Then the silence speaks loud enough. The Boltons left that same night. Meanwhile, the Umbers sent a raven, not a thank you, but a warning. One of their scouts had been found dead near the last hearth, tortured. The message carved into his chest read, "Traitors bleed first." Ned's decision had opened a gate, and now the wolves weren't guarding it. They were fleeing from it. Later that week, Jon Snow approached his father one last time. They stood under the weirwood tree, where truth could not hide. "I'm leaving for the Wall," Jon said. "I need to be somewhere I can believe in something. You don't understand." "I understand enough. I'd rather freeze with honor than burn with lies." Jon left at dawn. Ned watched him ride away, knowing that was the last time he'd ever see him as a boy. The secret oath had bought the Starks time, but at the cost of everything that made them whole. And far beyond Winterfell, in the quiet chambers of King's Landing, Queen Cersei smiled. The North had already begun to crumble from within. The snows thickened as word of the North's unease began to trickle south. Whispers of stark dishonor reached the ears of men who once would have died under their banner. The ancient cry, "The North remembers," sounded different now, not proud, accusatory. They remembered the kings who fought for their own, and now they saw a lord who bent silently for the sake of his bloodline, a lord who chose safety over truth. Inside Winterfell, even the halls seemed colder. The warmth of roaring hearths didn't reach the soul of the place anymore. Maids gossiped in corners. Stable hands looked twice at every shadow. The servants who once praised Lord Stark's fairness now avoided his gaze altogether. And then came the true blow, a raven from the Eyrie. Lysa Arryn had written a letter not only to Winterfell, but to every major house in the north. She accused the Lannisters of murdering Jon Arryn, and buried within her words, subtle yet unmistakable, was another dagger. "Those who kneel to snakes will soon be swallowed whole." It was aimed squarely at Ned. Ned summoned Catelyn to the solar, her face sharp with grief and suspicion. "She's turning them against us," he said. Catelyn didn't blink. "You gave her the blade." There was no fire in her words, only truth, like a sword sliding into flesh without resistance. Before he could speak, a knock at the door interrupted them. Robb entered, eyes filled with something that hadn't been there before. Steel. "Lord, Umber refuses to answer your summons," he said, "and Karstark has begun fortifying his own lands without your order." Ned stood slowly. "The bannermen—" "They no longer see a warden, father," Robb cut in. "They see a man who sold his voice to the highest bidder." Catelyn looked away. Her silence was now louder than any accusation. Outside Winterfell, tensions mounted. Farmers were robbed on the roads. Messages vanished. Small folk whispered of black-cloaked riders seen too far north, always watching, never speaking. One day, a merchant was found murdered just past the last river, gold coins from King's Landing in his pouch. His tongue had been cut out. The meaning was not lost on anyone. Meanwhile, Sansa clung to her dreams. Joffrey's name still sat sweet on her lips, even as his mother orchestrated betrayal after betrayal. She didn't understand the weight of secrets, only the fantasy of silk and songs. She begged Ned to let her write to the Queen, to reassure her of the North's loyalty. Arya exploded at her during supper. "You're blind. She wants us dead. Can't you see? She's my future," Sansa screamed back. "She's your prison." Catelyn slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" But the fracture between the sisters had deepened. That night, Arya was found in the training yard, bruised but relentless, dueling with wooden swords long past sunset. She didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be ready. As for Bran, still healing from his fall, he watched everything in silence. The boy who once dreamed of flying now dreamed of crows with 3 eyes and cold voices that spoke of wolves in chains. He began to ask strange questions. What happens if a wolf lies to the pack? Maester Luwin hesitated. "The pack breaks." Bran nodded, as if he'd already known. Then came the second southern demand. Send men to the neck. Allow safe passage for Crown scouts. Deny the Brotherhood without Banner's shelter. It was a death sentence for any northern honor still clinging to its last thread. The Brotherhood weren't enemies of the North. They were enemies of tyranny, protecting the people when lords would not. Ned refused this time. His letter back was brief. "The North protects its own. Your reach ends at the neck." Within days, 3 bodies were found hanging near Moat Cailin. Each bore the flayed man of House Bolton. No one confessed. No one needed to. Roose Bolton had made his choice, and it wasn't Winterfell. That night, Ned sat alone in the crypts beneath the stone gaze of his ancestors. He whispered their names like a prayer. Brandon, Lyanna, Rickard, Benjen. "I've failed them all," he said. But a voice echoed back in his mind, not from the dead, but from within. "You bent the knee to protect your blood, but now your blood bleeds from the inside." The betrayal was never announced. It didn't need to be. It bloomed like rot beneath snow, slow, quiet, irreversible. The bannermen stopped replying. The ravens flew back unopened. Even the houses still loyal to Winterfell did so out of habit, not trust. Ned Stark's word, once iron-bound, now carried the stain of compromise. Worse, he felt it in his bones, that deep, gnawing guilt that no sword could cut through. Winterfell stood tall and ancient, but the soul of it was cracking. Wolves howled less. The words "winter is coming" no longer sounded like warning, but regret. And then came the blade that finally cut deep. A northern village, small, loyal, isolated, was found burned to ash. Its men butchered, women missing, children slaughtered. There were no banners left behind, but those who arrived to bury the bodies found something worse. A southern coin lodged in a child's mouth. Gold stamped with the Lion of Lannister. The message was cruel and unmistakable. This is the price of silence. Robb was the first to act. He returned to Winterfell bloodied from his ride, eyes wild, fury bubbling beneath his skin. We ride south. We burn the ones responsible. We show them what it means to harm the North. Ned's voice cut through him. You will do nothing. That silenced the room. Robb stared at his father, trembling. They killed our people. Innocents. For what? Your deal? Arya leapt to her feet. We should kill them all. Even Sansa said nothing this time. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was gone. You think I don't want to? Ned shouted. You think I don't want to ride down there and flay the man who sent that message? But every move we make now invites more death. War is not strategy. It's fire. Once it starts, it consumes everything. Catelyn's voice came like frost. Maybe it's already started, Ned. That night, Robb packed his horse. He didn't say goodbye. He left a letter instead, short and carved in pain. I will earn the name Stark again, even if you won't. By dawn, he was gone, riding to rally the North, to take back what he believed his father had given away. Ned didn't stop him. He couldn't. Part of him felt relieved. Someone had to rise, and yet the fallout was instant. The Boltons declared their neutrality. The Karstarks armed their gates, the Manderleys withdrew from trade agreements, and in every tavern from White Harbor to Deepwood Motte, the rumors gained a name, the Stark Pact. Some believed the Starks had sworn to the crown in fear, others said for gold, but the worst ones whispered the most dangerous tale, that Ned Stark had planned this all along, that Winterfell was never the North's protector, it was its leash. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. Belief had already taken hold. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, a raven flew into the Red Keep. Cersei read the message with a smirk. They fracture, one son rides, the father bleeds, the North will not stand. She turned to Jaime. We don't need to conquer the North, they'll destroy themselves. And behind them in the shadows, Varys whispered into the dark, as they always do when wolves turn on wolves. Back in Winterfell, Ned's strength waned. He barely ate. He stopped leaving his solar. He spent hours staring into the fire, haunted by faces both dead and living. Maester Luwin pleaded with him to speak, to act. There's still time to call them back. Confess the oath, tell them why. They might forgive. No, Ned muttered. They must hate me. Better, me than each other. He had chosen sacrifice, but not the kind that saved kingdoms, the kind that left you alone with your ghosts. Down in the crypts, Bran began walking again, not physically, but in dreams. He wandered beneath the weirwood roots and saw shadows with golden eyes. He saw a crown made of ice, not fire. And in every dream, the same voice whispered, the wolf is bleeding, let him die. One night, Arya crept into the solar. She looked up at her father with steel in her eyes. I don't want to be a lady. Ned looked down at her. You won't have to be, but I don't want to be you either. That stung more than swords. The ravens stopped coming. Where once Winterfell's towers bristled with messengers and missives, now there was silence. It wasn't that the bannermen had forgotten. They were waiting, watching. The North was holding its breath, not out of hope, but dread. Then came the scream. It echoed across the godswood, wild and sharp. The stable boy, young and red-faced, had stumbled upon something behind the main hall. A body, strung up by the wrists, mouth sewn shut, a message carved into his chest. Each letter red with dried blood. Oathbreaker. Ned stood over the boy's corpse for a long time. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He only nodded once and ordered him buried with the same rites as a lord. No one asked questions, but everyone understood. That night, Catelyn confronted him in their chambers, her voice barely holding. You have to end this." "There's no end," he replied, "only fallout. There is still honor, still a chance if you face it. Tell them, let them judge you, not whispers. I made this bed to keep you safe." "We were never safe," she said, eyes glassy. "Not when you handed our name to lions." For the first time in weeks, Ned's mask cracked. "I thought I could outplay them, thought I could keep the North from burning without spilling blood." "You gave them the blade, Ned," she whispered, "and now it's at our throats." At the gates of Winterfell, torches flickered in the distance, riders, dozens, then hundreds. Robb had returned, but not as a boy. He wore leather and fur, sword-stained, a small army at his back. The flayed men of Bolton rode beside him. So did Karstark men. Even wild clans from the mountains had followed. Winterfell's gates opened slowly. No horns, no welcome. Robb dismounted and stood before his father. "I called the North," he said, "and the North answered." Ned approached him. "They came for you. They came for truth." The wind howled between them. Wolves circled, uneasy. "I never meant for this," Ned said. "I never thought the cost would be—" "You thought too small," Robb cut in. "You thought you could appease lions and keep the wolf fed. You thought the South would be content with quiet betrayal, but they want our bones, and you gave them the scent." "I did it for you," Ned said, one last plea. "For all of you." Robb's jaw clenched. "Then you should have died for us." The men behind him didn't cheer, didn't move. They waited. Catelyn stepped forward, placing herself between them. "He's still your father." "He was," Robb whispered. "But the man who bent the knee in the dark, that man isn't Stark." Ned raised his hands, slow, not in surrender, but understanding. "Then do what you came to do." Robb hesitated. His sword trembled, but before anything could happen, Bran's voice rang out behind them. "He's broken," the boy said, "but not lost." All turned. Bran stood unaided, leaning slightly, eyes glassy but sharp. He thought he was saving us. He wasn't. "But we're still here." Silence followed. Robb lowered his sword. "I won't kill you," he said, "but I won't follow you either." He turned to the bannerman. "The North needs a voice it can trust. I will be that voice." They roared in agreement. Ned nodded, his shoulders sagging. "Then be better than me." And just like that, the North had a new Stark to follow. Ned Stark remained in Winterfell, not as warden, not as lord, but as a father who'd tried too hard to shield what couldn't be protected, a man whose silence cost more than truth ever he could. The secret oath was never spoken of again. But the scar it left marked the North for a generation, and in the crypts below, beneath the gaze of old kings, a broken wolf whispered to stone, "Forgive me. I tried to be brave. I only ended up alone." Above him, Winterfell stood cold, but it stood, and the North remembered, always.